Hello there! I want to show you a new watercolor set by Kuretake. I'd like to swatch it with you and give you my first impressions. And I will make a painting. Actually, two of them, because I ruined the first one. But I want to show you failures too on this channel so that you don't fall under the impression that maybe you're the only one to fail sometimes. It's actually very common here in my studio to throw away like every third painting. But last week my failed rate was like 3 out of 4 paintings, but even though I was slightly discouraged, I continued working and eventually produced something that I'm not too ashamed to publish. So let's go check out this palette, and that's it for the intro. And here's the lovely Kuretake Gansai Tambi set. I was not sent this set by anyone. I chose it myself and had it on my wishlist for about 2 years. I've seen tons of reviews and I know a few things about how these paints are made and how they are far from traditional watercolor, yet I wanted to own the set and give it a try with my own technique and sort of make my own opinion about them. And by the way, I have to thank my patrons, especially those in my Paint With Me tier who participate and learn via the real-time video lessons, because that's how I was able to afford this set. I chose the largest one with many color options, so that was not cheap. I paid about 70 euros for it, but keep in mind that prices may be very different depending on where you live, and I bought mine from a Czech art supplies shop where I love to shop for things that are not available in Slovakia. I would encourage you to search for a local art supply store to support if you want to check out this palette and get it for yourself. But if you don't have that option, again, in the video description you can find links for these kind of things that I test out and simply buy them off of Amazon. Usually when I want to test out the quality of the paint, I buy primaries or a few extra colors that are my favorites, like indigo, Payne's Gray, green gold, and so on. But from what I gathered about Gansai paints, there could be some troubles with mixing them too much, because they are not a traditional single pigment transparent like Eastern watercolor paints. Rather, they are paints that have some more additives in them, not just gum arabic, which makes them more opaque, and according to the website they could be used as a gouache but also as a watercolor when watered down. Since this is a first impressions video, I will not get into too much detail, and I want to discuss this like more precisely in a proper review video, and I still feel like I need to paint with them more. Just keep that in mind as I talk about them, because I'm still getting acquainted with them a bit. But knowing this about the paint, that was the reason why I got a bigger palette, so that I have more colors available and I don't have to mix too much. By the way, the color range and swatching, so enjoyable. This set has 48 colors. It has 3 metallics in them, 1 white, then 2 flesh tones, beautiful pastel lilac, a wide range of greens, which is just my cup of tea. I counted 11 greens in this set and a good amount of options for blue. I didn't like the reds though. The 2 reds that were darker, they looked a bit muddy. And then there were other 3 reds that looked too similar. But I love the rose madder. I already reviewed the metallic paints from the same brand and line in another video, and you can find that linked below if you're interested. Well, after I swatched all that, I was really so excited to start a painting. And these Japanese watercolors, they come in very large pans, and that's mostly because they're intended to be used with that type of large brush. It's supposed to fit in there. And looking at those paints, I thought, let's make a larger painting when this is such a large palette full of large paints. Sketch took me already quite long, and I'm also in such a rush these days. I want to get the job done, and I have a very strict window of time to paint and film, and I'm ashamed to admit that I completely disregarded how important preparation is when doing larger artworks. It's different than doing casual studies. Some people don't need to prepare a thumbnail, or at least think the technique through before they start, but watercolor is like a small kid in the playground. If you don't set proper rules and boundaries, then it just runs around making mess. And you can't set boundaries without the thumbnail, because you have to decide whether to protect some areas beforehand and whatnot. Looking at this painting now, I regret not thumbnailing it, not protecting the areas of the skin before starting to go crazy with color, and I want to apologize to this beautiful, beautiful sheet of Archie's watercolor paper for completely wasting it. And for 2 unproductive days in the studio that reminded me how dangerous it is to try to cut corners. Oh, and this beautiful blue-gray deep color, I wasted about half the pan when trying to paint the background here. If you are one of my regular subscribers and you heard my New Year's speech about wanting to progress this year and wanting to make larger artworks, this was a very, very lousy strategy to realize my goals. Okay, so what went wrong with this painting? First of all, the underpainting ruined my skin because I let the blue colors bleed into it and I wouldn't mind it on her shoulders. I intended to place blue ornaments there anyway, but on her face it just bled into all the wrong places and I couldn't lift the paint from there at all. Archie's paper is probably the best paper for layering technique. It really holds your layers in place, but the downside is that you can't use the lifting technique much, and I'm used to correcting things with lifting, and my regular go-to paper Canson Moulin du Roi lets me do that. And also from what I read about Kuretake Gansai Tambi paints, they were supposed to be easy to lift, but apparently not on Archie's paper. And so I did what I always do when I start noticing that something isn't going well. I try to cover stuff up with gouache and then layer more paints on top of it. And this takes for hours because it's a large sheet of paper and the skin looks worse and worse. It was really patchy and it just wasn't a job well done, but I still convinced myself that we can work this out, refreshed the line work with my mechanical pencil and then added the background. By the way, I worked with this blue-gray deep color from this set for a long time and the paint consistency was no different from when I'm working with Daniel Smith or my Schminky paints. It gets creamy when you work the paint out and you can achieve really dark background color, which is something that I was always struggling with other watercolor, especially the transparent watercolor. And I also did not have any problems with creating salty effects. Paints definitely were not staining the paper too much. But I have to say that colors don't look too brilliant after they dry, and I can see the difference, even though I did not use all of the paints from this set in my paintings yet. And look at how opaque these paints get. They really are designed to be used both ways, compromising on the transparency, but this makes them versatile. Also not very ideal for certain watercolor techniques. I will be able to do gouache techniques with them too, which is great because I'm definitely keeping this set. By the way, this is it for this painting. I strongly dislike the result. It just did not resonate with me, and so I put it aside to rethink what to do. I was looking at it for about 2 days and then decided to make a do-over on a smaller piece of paper and do a proper thumbnail of what I want to achieve in this piece. And that clarity really helped me out. I wanted to focus on ornaments around the figure and mostly on the kimono, and also use a strong color combination that I would enjoy myself. And I used paper that I'm more familiar with, which is the Canson Moulin du Roi that I've already mentioned. From the very first wash, I loved working on this piece. I just focused on the flow of paints and tried not to rush anything. Slowly added pastel turquoise color that's called malachite in this set and the rose madder too. I already saw what unusual opacity can these paints achieve, so this time I wanted to see how they perform if I watered them down. And I really got lovely hard edges typical for watercolor and quite a flow, even though they did not flow as much as my high-end artist watercolors do when I work wet in wet on these backgrounds. Still, the versatility of Kuretake is a thing. I wanted to create an atmosphere in this piece that would bind all the elements together instead of the painting consisting of separate blocks that did not communicate much like in the previous piece, or at least that's how I felt about the previous one. I tried not to work in one area too much but jump around the entire painting and really spare the image too much detail in the face. I also worked a lot of wet in wet, and these colors bleed into one another so well. My second background layer was so wet that after it dried, the masking tape couldn't hold the paper anymore, and so I made a decision to simply remove it and use a new one. Paper buckled a bit, but the painting will be just fine after I place a few books on top of it for a few days. Oh, and these ornaments, they were such a treat. I could paint ornaments for days on end. I'm in love with colors and shapes when well combined to create this weird sensation in my brain, and makes me feel so good when looking at them. It's like ice cream. Yeah, ornaments are like ice cream. That's what you're getting from today's video. Here I decided to use masking fluid to protect some areas and even create new shapes with it, as I wanted to cover the cloth with a wash of paint, and negative painting technique seemed like a real drag here in such a small area. I used Sennelier masking fluid, and you know, if you watch the purple cat video, that I bought a whole bunch of masking fluids from different brands to try out and review on this channel, and this was the first one that I started to work with, and it is already such an improvement from my Pebeo drawing gum. But let me leave that for a separate video because I don't want to confuse you with too much information about very different art supplies. But yeah, the masking fluid allowed me to finish painting the kimono without damaging the ornaments quite quickly, and I still left it on when painting one last layer of background, and this one was quite dark. I can get transparent with these paints and all looks great, but when I use dark colors from this set and then after they dry, I really can tell that they lose vibrancy and richness and just appear slightly chalky. But it's so much fun to work with them anyway. I love these colors, the way they look now on the camera. I would love to go back to them, and with watercolor you never actually get them. It always loses about 50% of saturation after it dries, but still this piece lost a bit more upon drying, and that's slightly disappointing to me. I don't think I'm going to use this set for more serious works. My first impression is that this would be handy for studies and practice. Let's remove the masking fluid now and reveal the lighter parts of the pattern. I had to paint in some more details and darker tones, and also decided to use one of the metallics from this set, the bluish gold, to embellish the pattern. And it looked great! Lastly, I mixed in some white gouache and used a sponge to create white flowers around the figure. This was part of my original thumbnails that I created for the piece, and before I did it I was slightly hesitant, but now I think I enjoyed the contrast. And this is it for the second piece. I would love to hear your thoughts on both if you want to share, and also let me know if you've tried the Kuretake Gansai Tambi set already and how did you like it. Because I'm always so nervous that I'm going to ruin someone's favorite art supply with my thoughts on it, but just keep in mind that these are very personal preferences. Opinions and observations, artists, they have different approaches, and different art supplies might work for them and help them in what they are trying to achieve. I hope the video brought you some value or entertainment, and if it did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe and all that jazz. Look for the promised links down below, and I will talk to you again very, very soon. Bye!